2. Art and articulation. To see a world in a grain of sand, and a heaven in a wildflower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour. William Blake. The doctor opened the door of the Black Swan and walked in. A chill breeze followed him, and the villagers, who were drinking and carousing once more, hushed. A candle guttered and died. "Where's Ace?" growled the Time Lord, advancing on George. The landlord grinned. "Away from here, in a place of safety." "It don't seem right, George," blurted Martha, looking around at the other villagers wildly. "What are we doing, all of us? Have we been possessed?" George sighed and bid his wife come to him. Timidly she did so. "We haven't been possessed, Martha. Let me show you why." Softly he stroked the back of her hair, and taking it as a sign of affection, Martha leaned closer to him. Gradually, as George stroked, a soft grey powder began to form at the back of her skull. She blinked, concerned, and reached up to her neck. The other villagers looked on in horror, crossing themselves. "George, what are you doing to me?" She examined the powder in her wrinkled hands. "I've decreased the power that's holding your form together," George smiled. "In a moment you'll cease to exist." The doctor stepped forward, but 2 burly tinkers seized him. "You've no reason to do this," he argued desperately. "I've no reason not to," George winked. "Watch this." Martha was desperately looking around the room, seeking help. The trickle of powder had become a steady stream, the back of her head dissolving into a river of grey dust. Whirling round, she reached out to grab the bar, and her arm exploded into a cloud of powder. Her legs gave way, and she sank to the floor, imploring her husband to help her. Gradually, the woman twitched and jerked into a pile of dusty clothes. Then the very clothes themselves became a pool of expanding dust. Finally, there was no sign that she had ever existed. "It's a fitting end," George murmured, "for someone as concerned with dusting." The doctor glared at him, sickened. "Spare me your obscene humour." "Doctor, calm yourself. She was never alive. Fictions cannot feel pain." Fictions. Indeed, this village, these people, these are illusions. He waved a hand at the window. "Their lives matter no more than the lives of snowflakes." The villagers looked at each other amazed. "Don't you understand yet? This is a trap. The master of the game has been outplayed." The doctor narrowed his eyes, seeming to come to a conclusion. "Who are you?" With a dramatic gesture, George reached up and grabbed the back of his own head. He pulled, and with a ripping of soft material, the whole face came away, revealing the silver blank of an astronaut's helmet. The face fell to the floor, spasming, and dissolved into dust. "A simple biological construct," laughed the astronaut, producing a gun from an inner pouch of his spacesuit. "But there wasn't room," cried out Bridget, the tinker's wife, hysterically. "That thing couldn't fit inside his head." "It didn't," murmured the doctor. "Our perceptions are being interfered with." "Indeed." The astronaut activated the catches on his necklock and removed the helmet. A mop of black hair over an angular face that smiled with grim intellect was revealed. "Lieutenant Rupert Hemmings of the British Freikorps. Your servant, sir." The tiny astronaut had dragged Ace back inside the atmosphere bubble and carried her up the hill to the darkened form of St. Christopher's Church. He kicked open the doors and strode inside, placing the young woman's unconscious form on the altar. Then he stepped back and removed his helmet. A mass of red hair dropped down over a tightly jealous little face, every muscle taut in a sneer. Piggy eyes looked out from over a squashed nose and thin, murderous jowls. Chad Boyle wasn't very pretty. If she had been awake, Ace would have wondered why her childhood bully was still only 8 years old. For his part, Chad wondered why Dottie was still alive when he had killed her years ago. Nobody had explained that to him yet. The boy shuddered, his whole expression changing from malice to cold calculation. He rubbed his eyes and blinked, flexing his muscles experimentally. Then there was a jerk of pain, and for a moment he doubled up, squealing. Then, with what seemed to be a great effort of will, he straightened up. "Don't fight it," he snarled to himself. "It only hurts when you fight. It's for your own good." He popped open a pocket on his suit and pulled out a tiny mechanical creature. Resembling a spider, it whirred and preened, extending microscopic probes to sense its surroundings. "That's a pineal manipulator," he grinned. "Very special. Put her through a lot of pain inside her head." Stepping forward, he reached out and placed the creature on Ace's forehead, brushing back her hair. "You've grown up," Boyle chuckled. "Think you're so old now? This'll show you." He stepped back as the creature began its work. It seemed to feel its way about Ace's skull, adjusting its position slightly. Then it extended a hair-thin probe which reached out towards the woman's skin just above her nose. Ace, just coming round from oxygen starvation, reached up to brush away whatever was irritating her forehead. But at that moment the probe pierced her skin. Her whole body jerked, her eyelids flickered, and then she lay still. "Wake up, Dorothy," giggled Chad Boyle. "You're dead." The doctor nodded grimly. "Yes, that explains a lot." The doctor had met Hemmings on an Earth changed by the actions of the Timewyrm, an Earth where the Nazis had conquered England. The man was a torturer, a minor player in that game. It seemed that he was to be centre stage here. "I can't tell you everything, of course." Hemmings waved a conciliatory hand at the doctor. "I'm working for the gods, following my destiny from the point where you interrupted it." Hemmings put the helmet down on the bar. "Gods?" The doctor frowned, seeming interested. "Oh yes, the ancient Norse gods. Or so I assume. They are the ones I believe in, and I doubt that any other would appear to me. Perhaps they're the gods of Ragnarok, the hosts of the end of the world." "No," muttered the doctor, smiling. "Please go on." "I wouldn't be so flippant if I were you," Hemmings warned. "I've been fortunate enough to glimpse the unseen world that I've always suspected existed. In the face of that experience, you, as my enemy, assume a very dangerous role. A trap. Typical." Hemmings ignored the knowledge contained in the doctor's grimace. "Well, a trap with artistic merit at least. I mean to say, the acting was strictly schoolboy, but the mistletoe has a kind of buzz to it. Loki tricked the god Balder into chancing his arm and used mistletoe, Balder's only weakness, to finish him off. Apt, I thought. What interest can you have in me now? Why are you here?" The doctor's eyes were alive with interest, burning into his opponent's brain. "In you, precious little. But my master seems to regard you as worth hunting, and I, having worshipped the gods through my life, my art, can hardly ignore divine guidance. I'm aware of only a part of the overall plan, Doctor. Your companion has been abducted, and you are in our power. That much makes universal sense." "You're working for something that you fear, aren't you?" "I don't fear anything." "Yes, you do. That speech about demons wasn't just an act. You're afraid that whatever you're working for will regard you as expendable." "Quiet!" Hemmings snapped, gesturing at the doctor with his pistol. "I'm quite aware of your methods, Doctor. This time you face an enemy who is prepared for you." "Are you?" the Time Lord smiled. "Your research didn't extend to wristwatches." The smile vanished. "Or anachronistic carols. Cuckoo. How appropriate." Suddenly he coughed, bending double. "Yeah, what's—" Hemmings jumped for his helmet. The doctor sprang up, wrenching free of his captors, and headed for the door. "Stop him!" called Hemmings. "We need him now." As the villagers poured out of the door after the doctor, Hemmings reflected on how easy they were to control. Puppets, mere organic creations, but with minds of their own so that they didn't have to be ordered to perform every simple action. They thought that they were alive and free. The doctor had been correct in that one thing at least. The obvious analogy scared him. He quenched the fear. His life mattered little beside the will of the gods. Clambering up out of the village, the Doctor headed straight for the TARDIS, a baying horde of villagers behind him. Through the woods he ran, as a blinding snow gale raged about him. The moon still blazed down over the forest, and he took advantage of the light to hide behind drifts of the glaring whiteness. Skipping from one tree to the next, the Doctor confused his enemies to such an extent that by the time he reached the TARDIS, they had split into many different groups, hunting all over the forest. All but two of them. They were standing in front of the TARDIS. Cautiously, the Doctor stepped from cover, watching their reactions. They were the Tinker couple, in carefully patched clothes. Rafferty and the woman Bridget. They hadn't yet noticed him. "Hello," he murmured, stepping forward. They reacted, about to shout and detain him. "No!" The Doctor raised a finger. "Listen. George is controlling your minds, but you are free. You have free will." Rafferty shook his head, "don't understand all this, but I do know that I have to take you back to the inn. I'm sorry about it and all." "So am I," whispered the Doctor, and spoke a word that sounded like glass breaking. At the sickening effect of the sound, the two villagers screamed and tried to embrace, but as they stumbled towards each other, they exploded, collapsing into clouds of flailing silver dust that settled slowly on the lunar surface. "Ashes to ashes," the Doctor murmured. Shuddering slightly, he stepped over them and opened the door of the TARDIS. The Doctor slowly walked around the TARDIS console, checking readings, reaching across with his umbrella to recalibrate instruments. The year, it seemed, was 1992. He hadn't looked, hadn't even bothered to check. He had walked straight out into the snow. That was hardly out of character, but even so. The spatial location was surprising also. The Lacus Somnorium on the Earth side of the moon. This game was getting deeper every moment. He leaned on the console for a moment, and then began to work frantically, preparing for the battle to come. "Is memory drain completed?" mumbled Boyle, stretching his arms over his head. The pineal manipulator chirruped in response, one multifaceted eye glowing green. "Your memory, Dotty, everything you are." Boyle reached out and plucked up the metal insect in his stubby fist. "I could kill you, right? Just like that." The pain came again, snapping his head up from his prize. "But I won't. Course I won't. That'd be stupid." The pain eased. Boyle rubbed his head. It was just like somebody was knocking a pin into the top of his skull. He knew who it was too. It was the Angel. The Angel had first visited him one night when he had gone to bed. His mum had told him that she wasn't going to read him a story anymore because he was old enough to go to sleep without one. That was rubbish, that was, because everything in his room was scary in the dark, full of monsters that might sneak up on him in the night. The story was only a good reason to have her there, a trick to get himself to sleep. So, one Perivale night, when the wind was whistling through the maze of paths that surrounded the deserted factories, Chad Boyle had been awake. Something had tapped on his window, and he put his face into his pillow, afraid to look up. "Mum," he had called weakly, but his mother hadn't heard, or more likely, had decided to ignore him. Then the Angel had called his name, nicely, like in some stupid fairy tale. He'd looked up and saw that there was a light outside the window, a little hovering butterfly light that seemed to be folding away into itself like all sorts of grown-up words that he was going to learn someday when he was a scientist. The Angel talked with a gentle woman's voice, saying that she had come from long ago and far away, and had felt his pain and loneliness. "I ain't lonely," Chad had sobbed. "I'm strong." The Angel had agreed, and told him that he was being wronged. Other children should like him, because he was cool and told good jokes. Then she asked him if he would like to go away on an adventure. Chad had said yes, and she said that she would send someone to get him sometime soon. The person she would send was actually a bad man who the angel was at war with, but when he slept, the angel could make him do what she wanted. Chad thought that was a radically cool idea. In the meantime, he could be as bad as he liked to the stupid kids that made fun of him. They weren't nearly as important as he was. Chad knew that was true. In particular, there was a certain girl that she knew annoyed him. Well, the angel had plans for her. She would whisper in his ear about them tomorrow. The angel had kept her promise, but it hadn't really been quite as the boy had imagined it. The angel sometimes talked for him, and made him do things before he had really agreed to do them. If he was really bad, she caused him pain. Still, he glanced down at Ace's motionless form. There were good bits too. He brought his thumb down on the back of the metal insect, and its transmitter light flicked on. The air filled with the burble of transmitted information. Ace's mind was blowing away on the wind. Finally, the sound ceased. The creature buzzed and looked up at the boy, awaiting its next task. Boyle ripped its wings off, threw it to the floor and stamped on it, laughing. The doctor rubbed his brow, irritated by a sudden pain. It went as quickly as it came. He reached out and touched a control. Ace swam up in a stream of butterfly bubbles, powering up out of a sea-black pit at the heart of the whirlpool. It wasn't water she was swimming through, but words, language. All around her rolled and broke phrases and meanings, and sometimes it seemed that she was part of the tide, her sense of self being only the ridge of a wave, about to crash and die on the beach, sweeping her back into a totality of nothingness. "The universe is not Newtonian anymore," said the sea, but prone to a synchronicity built on a very dense web of seemingly unrelated events. "Knights and squires, doctors and dicers, you're twisting my melon, man." With the words came images, though she had no eyes to see them. Glyphs of talking heads, symbols, iconic gods, they all swirled and blended, saying their piece and departing. It took an effort of memory to keep any idea of Ace together at all, but she was used to fighting for a name, from Dorry to Dotty to Dorothy, Dorothy to Ace. She had learnt who she was by being continually tested, and she wasn't going to give it up now to this tempting sense of community. Sometimes she'd woken up at nights, hearing noises through the wall, thinking that maybe she should go into school the next day and like that stupid music, those stupid girly clothes, just to get some friends. But always something inside her had said no. And here was the choice again, in much more direct terms. She could suffer pain and rejection and guilt as Ace, or she could slip away into the crowd of words and become nothing, floating, loved in nowhere. Ah well, pain it was. A great rush was whirling through the language, a rush of something being born or being taken home. Ahead was a freezing point, like a library or dictionary which the language dreaded, and so, for a moment, Ace dreaded it too. But then she heard the words that attended it. Impulsive, idealistic, ready to risk his life for a worthy cause, hates tyranny and oppression, never gives in, never gives up, believes in good and fights evil. Though often caught up in violent situations, he is a man of peace, he is never cruel or cowardly. And Ace knew that here was something beyond herself which she cared for terribly and painfully, something that could never be part of a crowd. The symbol for this awful goodness was a rose with a colour beyond colour, a rose covered in thorns that could pierce and injure any who approached too closely. Ace grabbed the rose and hung on, feeling identity fill up her form once more, memories and smells and tastes and ancient half-forgotten touches. She looked at her hand as it appeared before her. The rose was gone, and she was unharmed. Standing, she saw that she was on a beach, a very normal beach, a dark seafront with a pier that stood skeletal and black with rust. The tide hissed and sighed about her. Shaking the water from her hair, she set out for the pier. In situations weird as this, Ace had learnt that action was often more useful than words. Still, an awful idea nagged at her. The last thing she remembered had been a clenching of her lungs, a horrible, cold attempt to draw a breath when there had been none to draw. She looked around. Nah, it's Cromer. A light was flashing red at the entrance to the pier, so she headed for that. Black stick gulls soared in the sky, crying deathly cries. There was a town up on the seafront, but it was full of closed shops and deserted arcades. Must be the off-season. She clambered up onto the promenade and reached the entrance to the pier. The red light rotated on top of a small carousel, beside which stood a startlingly beautiful woman, clad in a long grey hooded robe. "Oh, hello," she said brightly, her eyes a beautiful blue. "You've rather caught me on the hop." She skipped off the ride and popped into the ticket booth that formed the front of the pier. Picking up a pen and an ornate book, she smiled down at Ace. "Now, first of all, any questions?" "Yeah." Ace bit her lip and tried for the easiest option first. "Look, I haven't, by accident, eaten anything, or have I?" No, laughed the woman. "Your reputation on that score remained clean to the end. Oh dear, I've let it slip, haven't I?" Ace's eyeballs bulged, her fists clenched. She wanted to hammer on the booth and shout her head off, but that would have been too uncool to contemplate. After a moment she handled it. "You mean I'm dead?" "Yes, sorry. I'm in charge of getting people used to the idea. I'm not very good at it, I'm afraid." Ace looked around her. The wind on her skin felt real. The tiny drops of rain in the air were wet and cold. Everything but the woman was such a normal grey. The place reminded her of that time she'd hitched up to Morecambe to go to a thrash metal gig. Dead? How'd it happen? The woman checked her book. "Oxygen starvation. Brought about from finding yourself on the moon, having believed the place to be Norfolk. I do believe that's unique. So what do I do now?" "Well, I've entered your name on the lists. That means you must proceed to the gate, where you'll be judged and, sent on." "What's this place, then?" "It has been called a limbo, generally by mystics who pop in for tea and stickies and then go away again. All this," she waved to indicate the surroundings, "is what I believe you would call an icon, a representative image. I can change it to anything else that suggests angst and melancholia, but I rather like it this way. I can't stay, can I? Do you really want to?" Ace looked around at the beach and the gulls and the grey retirement homes. The air in this place smelt of longing, the same smell that wafted down the London Underground at the start of winter, the taste of dead dreams and unfulfilled wishes. Well, that was the whole point of growing up, wasn't it? To stop wishing and start doing. She had lived as fast as she wanted to, but had died far too young. At least somewhere on the moon there was a good-looking corpse. Lots of regrets, too. "No," she said finally. "Can't smile. I just got the idea that... This isn't a joke, is it? No, you're really dead. The doctor miscalculated, I'm afraid." "You what?" Ace looked up, startled. "He was betting on you surviving that few minutes of decompression, I gather." The woman pointed to a tiny black and white television installed in her booth. "I'm rather fond of his programme, actually." "The professor went and got me killed," Ace whispered, and then shouted, "He finally went and did it!" "Don't be angry," warned the woman. "That might not augur well for you in what is to follow. Are you ready for divine judgment?" "Yeah," smiled Ace grimly, shouldering her rucksack. "But is it ready for me?" The doctor was looking at the scanner, trying to see through the lie of Childen Boniface. "The energy required," he muttered. "The depth of the illusion, gravity even. How is that done?" He pulled a fob watch from his pocket and checked it quickly, like he was hiding it from someone. It was gone again, just as quickly. Hemmings paced the inn, kicking chairs. He was surprised that this continual Christmas atmosphere, the eternal expectation, was irritating him. Perhaps it was because Christmas in his household had been such a joyful time. His father would prepare a mammoth breakfast and they would exchange presents before the hearth. Time was less of a secular concept on the moon, where it wasn't kept by festivals and routines, but by the slow decay of rock under radiation. There would be a dawn, of course, eventually, but a bit of snow and a few maliciously chosen decorations wouldn't make it Christmas morning. So why did he want it to be real anyway? Wasn't he concerned with destiny? Well, some distant, unmoved part of his mind replied, destiny is a very boyish thing. He had toys enough in the villagers, but what happened when Santa came calling? He aimed at a horse brass that decorated the bar and blew it into moon dust. Mr. and Mrs. Hutchings were singing along to a hymn from their pew at the back of St. Christopher's, both trying to mime the words that they couldn't remember. Yet in the dark street shineth the everlasting light. The hopes and fears of all the years are gathered here tonight. Emily could hear the somewhat tense voices of the community around her, and that of her husband at her side, but there was someone else singing, high and beautiful. A male voice, but one that contained a kind of female potential. Emily remembered hearing something similar when she was a teenager, getting over a fever. She had told her mother that a pile of clothes on a chair was actually a rhinoceros. Mum, of course, had laughed, and Emily, in her delirium, had been hurt. The clothes had, after all, just charged the mantelpiece. She had shivered, afraid for her life, and she had heard something half-blurred that she had rationalised as being from a TV downstairs, but that sounded like it had been transmitted over light years. Fear, the voice had muttered, makes companions of us all. And in this church was something like the same voice, evocative of those years of study and tears. Emily fervently hoped that this wasn't God. If she ever met him, she had the awful feeling that she'd asked him to go away, because she didn't actually believe in him, to be completely honest, and she didn't want to be the kind of person who chatted to deities. "That is certainly hypocritical of you," said the voice, pausing between verses. "Hold this for a minute," muttered a small Scottish man, handing her a baby. Emily did something she'd never imagined doing. Something very old-fashioned. She fainted. Chad Boyle was kicking lunar stones in the church, fed up with waiting. "It shouldn't be long," the internal angel murmured to him soothingly. "We've sent her into the systems our presence cannot reach." He let down his defences quite unconsciously, because she was such a familiar personality. "The plan is well in motion." "Don't know what you're on about," complained Chad. "I'm hungry and I want to do horrible things to Dotty." "Horrible things like what?" asked the female voice. "Fill her mouth up with worms or pull out all her toenails. Really horrible things." So the angel showed Chad some pictures of really horrible things. She showed him war and grief and torture, genocide and cruelty. She showed him that these things were universal and universally ignored when there was profit to be made or advantage to be gained. She showed him what the universe was like in her eyes. It was almost a test to see just how well suited her little partner was to her grand intentions. Or perhaps it was some frustrated search for communion. Chad had started to cry with the revelation of it all and muttered nightmare words. When it was over, he opened his eyes, shaken and a little older. "Those too," he whispered. "Those things too. But first I want to find some worms." "You will have your chance," the voice calmed him, "at the right time." Ace had wandered down the length of the pier, having serious doubts. She had never really stopped to think about believing in anything. All she had ever believed in was her friends. That wouldn't go down well. Neither would how it was with her and Audrey, her mother. She swallowed hard and kept walking. Too late now. At the end of the pier stood a theatre, its hoardings blank and grey, the remnants of posters having rotted away. The great empty spaces invited graffiti, but Ace felt that she should be on her best behaviour. The door of the place was open. Cool as a pint of milk, Ace stepped inside. With a little leap of consciousness that felt like a TV must feel when it's switched off, Ace found herself in the centre of an auditorium. In banked seats, an expectant audience looked down at her. She couldn't see who was up there, but it was almost like being amongst old friends, a bunch of familiar sounds and smells that hovered unknown at the edge of recognition. Her head felt dozy too, like she had wandered into some fuzzy dream. A spotlight blazed onto her, and she threw up her hand to protect her eyes. The crowd clapped and cheered. "It's not supposed to be like this," shouted Ace. "What's happened to the pearly gates?" "Times change," muttered a female voice from behind the spotlight. Well, that was one suspicion confirmed. God was a woman. "You must pass on to your first destination." "Wait a minute, I've got to ask you." "No answers, nothing here is that simple. What you are required to do must remain a mystery." Ace was about to argue very fiercely, but then she was, just as suddenly, elsewhere again. Behind her, the dark audience shifted and stirred. They would see her again, they knew, for they knew more of this matter than anyone. They sat muttering in pleasant anticipation. Anticipation smelt of brimstone and roses.